Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
The summer of 2020 will not soon be forgotten, and what is coming right behind it is the fall of 2020, which will have its own set of challenges. I am Chris William, and thank you again for watching and supporting the longest running and most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs seen across the Carolinas for almost 30 years now. On this dialogue, we will start with Andy Shain from the Post and Courier and Laura Ullrich, who's an economist with the Federal Reserve. And then later on, the Chief Executive Officer of the South Carolina Ports Authority, Jim Newsome, joins us. We hope you'll stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Andy Shain, Columbia Bureau Chief of the Post and Courier, Laura Ullrich from the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, and special guest Jim Newsome, President and CEO of the South Carolina Ports Authority.
Welcome again to our dialogue. Laura Ullrich, welcome to the program. Andy Shain, good to have you both here, and thank you. You look healthy and you look safely distanced. Laura, I'll start with you. So we're all talking about the restart of schools, K through 12, even colleges are going, through the numerations and machinations about how they're going to start. Not from a policy standpoint, Laura, but as we figure out what a restart in schools look like, what is the budget behind all of this? Is it just eviscerated? Are we whistling past the graveyard? What are budgets going to look like for schools?
So it depends on the type of school you're talking about, and it depends on the revenue sources that the schools rely on. So, and certainly not all schools are created equal. Prior to being at the Federal Reserve, I was in higher ed for many, many years at a state university. So we did rely on state revenue support, certainly. And historically, a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate has been associated with a 3.7 percentage point decrease in state tax revenues, holding tax policy constant. Brookings Institute did a study showing that years ago. So obviously this situation is very different. This pandemic is so different than what we've had in the past that who knows if that historical pattern will hold perfectly, right? But certainly because of the drop we saw in retail sales and the increase we've seen in unemployment, tax revenues will take a hit. So state institutions that rely heavily on those state tax revenues are likely going to struggle compared to other years. Other large private institutions that don't rely as much on student tuition revenue or revenue from room and board, they'll likely be okay, right? So if you think about a Duke or some of the Johns Hopkins we have in our region in the 5th district is similar. But then smaller private schools rely really heavily on what we call auxiliary revenue, which is room and board and the rental space that they have on their campus. And so if they're not able to bring students back, they risk losing a lot of their revenues. So this is going to be a tough year.
So Andy, let's go to the policy discussion around that. So as we get closer and closer to the start of school, and in your case it would be in South Carolina, but as we get closer to this, the raw tensions between those that have these pretty wide opinions of in-person or virtual, will that continue, or will we find some momentum once school eventually does begin?
I think it's going to all depend on the case numbers. We've been hitting record high case numbers here in South Carolina now, pretty much through much of the month going into early June. It's been a really rough period for South Carolina when it comes to the percent positive numbers we're seeing, hospitalizations, number of people on ventilators. South Carolina has become a major national hotspot, actually a national global hotspot, ranking in the top 5 if it were an independent country, in the world based on the increase in the case rate here. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on whether that case rate slows down in the next few weeks. I mean, this is a crucial time right now. The education department wants plans from the school districts on how it will teach children, whether it's going to do, all virtual or a hybrid of virtual and in classroom. The governor wants to have at least an option where there's in-classroom teaching during the entire week, if that's what parents want to do. But it's going to be, I think, hard for many parents to send their kids to school when we're seeing case rates that we haven't seen before, and that are 3 times, 4 times higher than when we initiated a stay-at-home order.
Laura, let me come back to you and switch gears just a little bit. There's been this talk of, well, not just talk, we know unemployment benefits are going to sunset, and sooner rather than later. Is there some, it's not the right way to say it, Laura, but I think you'll be able to articulate this much better than me, being the financial scientist that you are. Is there some level of impending doom for the economy once those things sunset? And not to be insensitive, but will we be fine once that happens?
So the extra $600 a week that people on unemployment benefits have been getting that was passed through the CARES Act is set to expire July 25th. Mm-hmm. It's likely that there will be some additional stimulus package that's proposed in Congress and the Senate in the coming days or weeks, but it's likely not to be passed before those payments sunset on the 25th. So a lot of it depends on spending patterns. And what we've seen throughout this is that actually personal income increased in the months of April and May, and that was because of stimulus package and these extra unemployment payments. And lower income families actually kept their spending levels at higher, they spent more than higher income families did as a percent of their income. And so some of the question lies in how higher income families change their spending patterns over time, and what happens to the spending patterns of these lower income families, because there's no doubt that that there will be a significant loss of income. And the reason I say that is because if you look at, as of the week of July 11th, that's the most recent data we have, over 400,000 people in North Carolina and over 200,000 people in South Carolina either had filed a new claim or had a continuing claim. So there's a significant number of people in both states that are receiving these payments. And so losing that extra $600 a week is significant. It's also significant because for the majority of people on unemployment insurance, they're actually making more money on unemployment insurance than they made when they were working.
I'm sorry, Laura. Andy,
go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, how does that manifest itself? Do you see in South Carolina, or do you see in the landscape that you look at, same thing, that there's some level of impending, I don't want to say doom, but certainly there's some level of that, or do you think, again, not to be insensitive, that it's another milestone that will hit and we'll move on?
You know, right now, because we've done so much reopening in South Carolina that basically the only thing that's formally shut down are large-scale mass gathering places, movie theaters, stadiums, arenas, nightclubs. Otherwise, we're open. And so you have people who've returned to jobs at restaurants. You have people who've returned to jobs at stores. You've had people who have, returned to jobs at bowling alleys. I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, these things are open again in South Carolina. So we saw an uptick in the latest jobs report of people going back to work, and that was the goal that Governor McMaster set. So, I think the fear here is, what is the impact of this latest surge? Again, a surge that we're seeing in both North and South Carolina, And does that mean that we need to go back to what we had in April, when we were having stay-at-home orders, when we were banning eating in restaurants and that kind of thing, and also severe limits on maybe where we could shop, just at the quote-unquote essential places that people said that we needed to shop at. So that's, I think, the bigger fear is, should we go back to that to try to stem this tide of cases that we're seeing? But for the most part, it's been as I said, business has been growing, getting back. Are we back to where we were pre the outbreak? Of course not. But again, that seems to be the policy goal of the folks in Columbia, and it seems to be, at least in part, working. But unfortunately, it also maybe is helping contribute to what we're seeing in an uptick in cases.
And Laura, in about 30 seconds, we got to bring our guest on. About 30 seconds. Does a vaccine change the whole game? As a clinical economist, do you think if there was a vaccine announced, it's all decks are cleared, it's a brand new day?
I think it depends on how safe people view the vaccine. If they view it as rushed or not safe, then maybe not. But if people view it as safe, then yes. But I will say, to add on to what was Andy was saying, we have some high frequency mobility data that we can look at that's updated more often than some of these other, payroll or unemployment reports. And that is showing that people in both North and South Carolina are starting to pull back a little bit in terms of how often they're leaving their house and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily take the government telling you have to stay home for you to make some changes based on the numbers that Andy's saying, the COVID-19 numbers. So we are seeing people pull back a little bit at this time.
And Laura, if I may add, that what you're seeing is cell phone data, right? You're seeing that people are not leaving their homes as much.
Yes, correct.
Earlier this week was a major economic development announcement from the South Carolina Ports Authority. Joining us now safely from their new building in the Lowcountry is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the South Carolina Ports Authority, Jim Newsome. Jim, welcome back to the dialogue. And what an announcement. I mean, at least in the initial, the first pass, it looks big, but how big is this announcement? What does this really mean?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Chris. Walmart stores is the largest U.S. retailer, and they're the largest importer. So for them to announce a major import distribution center in the greater Charleston area is a big coup for the port. As you know, we've sort of doubled our volume in the last 10 years based on advanced manufacturing, but we've been trying to tack into retail distribution and other types of export transloading. So this gives us a lot of impetus. They are obviously a very, very strategic company, very innovative. So we're really proud that they're going to do more business here.
Andy, I promise I'm going to give you a chance to jump in, and Laura, in just a second. Let me follow up quickly with that, Jim. Why? I mean, besides the fact that it's going to be 250 acres, 1,000 people at full employment, et cetera, what does it mean for, is this important in the retail aspect of the portfolio mix of the port? Is that what this is?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've not been a big player historically in retail. This should increase our volume by about 5% autonomously when it's up to full operation. And I think just the fact that a sophisticated retailer such as Walmart that is very omni-channel capable chooses this location, I think shows that we're a capable port and a place where other retailers should potentially look as well.
Andy?
Jim, like a lot of other things in the economy, you were having a banner year before the COVID pandemic hit. What does getting these businesses to your Ridgeville facility mean in making up for maybe some of that lost business that may be slow to come back even as we get out of this?
Well, nice to see you, Andy. Yeah, you're right. We were on record pace. We were well ahead of our plan, and then we ended the fiscal year in June about 60,000 containers behind plan. So we've been down about 15% since March, and I think that has really enabled us and really caused us to refocus on business development in segments where we have not been traditionally strong. So retail distribution, as you know, retail is the biggest part of our economy, consumption. So we're focused there, and we're also focused on getting those containers reused with export cargoes. So basic commodities like forest products, ag products, plastics are cargoes that can reuse the containers. So we're really on a good path business development wise, and I think that will enable us to get back on track as the economy recovers.
Laura.
So congratulations on the news, and I'm really excited for the growth that you guys have had at the port. And I know the Leatherman terminal, which is believed is scheduled to open next year, is a big part of that plan as well. Is that project still on track? Have there been impacts from COVID or delays? And also, can you just explain what the addition of the Leatherman terminal does for you guys in terms of capacity?
Well, nice to see you, Laura. The Leatherman terminal is the first new container terminal built in the United States since 2009, so it's a big deal. It adds an amount of capacity in 3 phases that will make it the same size as the Wando terminal, about 2.4 million TEUs. So it really will take us from about 3 million TEUs of capacity to about 5.4 million TEUs of capacity when it's finished in 2031. We were on the tail end of a capital plan, of a $2 billion capital plan, which would finish this year. And being a long-term business, that really hasn't changed. So the pandemic is, we hope, a short-term impact on what is a very promising future.
Great.
Jim, there was some back and forth over the last years with the Low Country and certainly the residents of Charleston, and the idea that the Ports Authority wanted to build up the passenger cruise business. You finally got to that, and then COVID came along. What is that? How much at risk is that line of business for you now? What does it mean for the residents, and does it bring back up the issue that a lot of Charlestonians don't want to have that business?
Well, I think that, it's been a very important niche for us. We make close to $10 million in operating cash flow on that business. We've got a great partner in Carnival. I mean, they're the leading cruise operator in the world. They certainly want to be in the Charleston market. They've been very successful here. As you know, they've added a more modern cruise ship to the market here. And we're in the process of doing a long-term contract with them, which will keep them here for many years. And as part of that, will give us the impetus to build a new cruise terminal. So we're very positive about the business in the future. I think most people, see the port as a strategic asset, and certainly cruises for us are an important niche.
Mm-hmm. Andy?
Again, coming back from the pandemic, or obviously whenever that happens, retail is one portion of it. With I know cars are a huge, the vehicles are a huge part of your business. Again, unsure when that exactly going to balance out. What else can you do? What else are you looking at doing in the near term to help make up for some of that shortfall, or for the long term, seeing how that this is maybe some new lessons learned, in what's happened?
Well, you're right. I mean, we obviously saw what was going to happen in the Asia trade when China shut down, and then the U.S. economy effectively shut down at the end of March. We certainly didn't see how it would impact the automotive business. So it had quite an impact on the automotive business short term. I'm pleased to say that BMW is back at pretty much full production now. But I think we have also learned that we have to be more diverse in our cargo base. It's one of our strategic initiatives. So obviously growing retail distribution, growing export transloading, and then getting more capable in rail. As you know, we have opened 2 inland ports in the state, one in Courier, which is handling really record volumes, second one in Dillon, but improving our rail footprint in the greater Charleston area, opening a new intermodal container transfer facility so we can handle more discretionary rail, because rail extends the reach of a port. So I think, we're diversifying our cargo base. We've got a lot of good projects we're working on today, in spite of what you would think maybe that wouldn't be the case in this type of economy. But I think it's actually when people look to do things.
Laura?
Jim, you mentioned China briefly there, and I do have a question about that. There's been a lot of talk in the media about companies and maybe shifting their production away from China, or their supply chains away from China in the wake of COVID-19. Are you guys seeing any evidence of that in terms of where shipments are coming from or going to in and out of the South Carolina port?
Well, Laura, it's certainly one of the major questions today. Everybody hypothesizes that people will move manufacturing from China either back to the United States or to other countries in Asia. I mean, we're seeing some of what they call a +1 strategy, meaning maybe China plus Vietnam, China plus Cambodia, something like that. But I think one should not forget that supply chains are really strategic, and that the China sourcing, China supply chain story is something that built up over 25 or 30 years. 7 of the 10 largest ports in the world are in China. So I think it's for large retailers to abandon China or to significantly downsize, I think is not realistic. And frankly, I don't see all those jobs coming back to the United States, because I think a lot of the manufacturing that is in Asia is low value, and I don't see it really working at U.S. wage rates. So China seems to have bounced back. Obviously, it took a hit in the 2 months, March and April. A lot of people drew some erroneous conclusions there as far as we're concerned. I think China will continue to be a significant force in global sourcing.
Jim, right after Memorial Day this year, following the tragic death of George Floyd, the country went into a very acute debate about racial equity and fairness. And we saw protests in towns like Charleston, and quite frankly, Charleston may have been one of the worst in the Carolinas when it came to damage and riots and those making a point for Black Lives Matters and what was fair. What do you do? How does the Ports Authority now, not just because you're in Charleston and you've got a major headcount in Charleston, but how do you maintain constructive and relevant dialogue about racial equity and keeping it in the front and keeping it part of the dialogue, and it doesn't just now become something that's lost in the mix of COVID-19 and the economy in the fall?
Well, Chris, it's an important issue for us. I mean, we've got a very diverse workforce in the maritime communities, not just the port. I mean, we've got great partners in 3 crafts of the International Longshoremen's Association, trucking community, et cetera, et cetera. So we take the matter very seriously. We did hold a cooperative rally on our terminal here with the ILA. A lot of attendance there to discuss the topic. I think, and our main issue is really to get the discussion on the table, to recognize that it's an issue, to talk to our people about it, to make sure that they're sensitive, that they are not misusing social media, and that they understand that they've got to respect their fellow man. So I think we all have learned a lesson from this, and that we have to be sensitive to others' concerns in these very important times.
We have about 2 minutes left. Andy?
Jim, one of the things I'm sure you're dealing with is the growth in Charleston. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Just in my time back in South Carolina in the past decade, it's amazing to see how many more cars are on the highways. What kind of challenge has that growth posed to the port in getting goods in and out? And what is it that you feel like you need from the state, from the county, from the city to better facilitate that transportation in and out of the port as the population's been booming?
Well, obviously the state has got to deliver improved infrastructure, but I think we're not waiting on that. We are doing what we can ourselves to impact the issue positively. We've expanded our gate hours. We start a 5 a.m. gate now, and I think we'll actually run longer hours earlier as we get into this retail business. Opening the new Leatherman terminal itself will enable us to move about 350,000 containers over to the new terminal to take a little load off of this terminal. And then we're working on a new intermodal container transfer facility, and we hope to serve that via barge. So if we can use a barge to move 250,000 containers between Wando and the new intermodal container transfer facility, that'll have a positive impact. So we listen to the community. We have to coexist with a great community, but I think the community also has to realize that our mission is to grow as well.
Mm-hmm. Laura, I'm gonna ask him a follow-up question. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna butt in line here for a second, and we're almost out of time anyway. Jim, following all these things that we've talked about, the growth, the protests, this moment in time with public health, has it gotten harder given that your job is to bring public policy from not just the State House, but make it work? Is it harder to build consensus now, given where we are?
Yeah, I don't know if it's harder. I think we have to, we have a smart workforce in the maritime community. We haven't missed a day or an hour of work here, really. Due to the pandemic, we've been very, very fortunate. We're an essential industry. And I think our message has been that it's really down in a country like America to individual initiative. We have to be smart. We have to wear masks. We have to stay out of public places, crowded public places. And I think we have to continue to articulate a vision of what makes us successful. And I think that's the role of any leader. I think it's what we try to do here, is to make it clear to our folks how we win as an industry. And fortunately, we've had some success, and I hope that we have a lot more.
And this is not given, and that's fair, but I'm going to ask you anyway. This Walmart announcement earlier, this is not your swan song, is it? You're not leaving.
No, not my swan song. We got a lot more to do. We got a great team here at the port, and I, got a lot to accomplish. And the day that I do leave one day, I can assure you the place will run very, very well. Okay.
Jim, as always, we appreciate your leadership. Thanks for being a guest on our program. And again, congratulations. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Andy.
Andy, nice to see you. Thanks for being back on the program. Laura, welcome. Please come back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. We hope you stay safe, and thank you for supporting this dialogue. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.